Welcome to the meditation on subpersonalities. I'm Joel with Taproot Therapy, and today we're going to do a meditation that's going to help you explore all the different parts of yourself and the ages that they are and the places that they come from. So if you haven't already, get into a comfortable posture, like laying on the floor, or crossing your legs and sitting upright, maybe sitting in a comfortable chair, somewhere where you can expand your lungs and take full deep breaths. And check in with your body and notice what you're feeling, and then start your deep breathing. About 1 or 2 seconds in, and 1 or 2 seconds out. Deep, full breaths that fill your lungs all the way, but not to the point where it's uncomfortable. And as you do your deep breathing, start to reflect on your personality, all of the things that came together to make you you. Some of them are older than us, we were born into the world with, and then other ones we pick up along the way as we grow and we change. And sometimes we have to put parts down that are holding us back from having what we really want. And other times, we make contact with things that we didn't even know were parts of us because we were so out of touch with them. And just start to ask yourself the question as you do your deep breathing: what within me needs to die so that the rest of me can live? What within me needs to die so that the rest of me can live? What within me needs to die so that the rest of me can live? And now the first part of our personality that we're going to make contact with is the inner critic. The inner critic is the energy pattern that finds fault with all of who we are and all that we do. And its goal is to, sometimes somewhat abusively, motivate us to be better. But when it gets out of control, it can make us feel paralyzed and awful. The inner critic is the part of your personality that, when you leave a party, says, yeah, everybody laughed at your joke, but really, they thought it was stupid. Or when you look in the mirror, or when you look at your resume, it says, well, yeah, you're here, but if you'd done this, and this, you'd be somewhere else. The inner critic can never be content. It's the part that thinks that what you did wasn't enough, that what you're doing is bad, that what you are isn't enough, and that's what the inner critic is. So if you can take a minute and do some deep breathing, start to make contact with that part of your personality. And don't just think about it intellectually, but try and feel it emotionally. The panic that you aren't good enough, that you haven't done enough, and that you'll never get where you want to go. We get this part of our personality usually when we're starting to potty train and we're starting to learn that we have to forgo instant gratification, that there's a bigger reward later if we can suffer right now. And when we're first born, And we're babies. We don't have an ego, and we don't have an aware self. We are all aware self. We don't know that we're separate from other babies, or from our mother, or from the things we touch. We're just part of everything, and everything is part of us. And when we need something, and we're hurting, we just cry out, and then it's given to us, food, or warmth, or comfort. And then all of a sudden, we get to be 2, 1.5, 3, at some point. And our parents say, you know what, actually we don't care what you want. You have to be here and not there, or you don't get the candy. Even though you feel angry, you can't throw your spoon. And this is traumatic because it was a pretty good arrangement we had with the universe. We just asked for things and then it was given to us, and all of a sudden we have to suffer. And the people who love us are telling us, you have to do what you don't want to do. And you're going to be in trouble and I'm going to be angry unless you do. And we learn slowly. Hurting is good sometimes. Telling myself that I'm bad, that I need to be hurt, sometimes helps me. If we lose control of this part of our development, if our caregivers are too strict, if our own will is too adamantine and too rigid, then this part of ourself is something that we become over-identified with that can be damaging. If our caregivers are too benevolent, or too negligent, too stuck in their own development, they may not push us to learn this lesson at all. We might be under-identified with the inner critic. We might need to make ourselves know that sometimes we have to do what's hard, and we have to be hard on ourselves in order to improve. So just take a minute and feel the energy of the inner critic. Where does it live in your body? How does it relate to your life? And what kind of messages does it tell you? A lot of times the inner critic can sound like a critical caregiver or a critical voice in society. And we don't recognize it because it beats us up with the tone or tactics that were used to be abusive to us or controlling of us. But it beats us up with their tactics about our own goals. It tells us abusively that we're failing to be our authentic self, that we are failing to be as good as we could. So take a breath and reflect on when you've heard messages like that. And how they've affected your life. When you're feeling the inner critic controlling you and belittling you and trying to motivate you, what do you feel in your body? When you feel not good enough? When you feel like you should do better? When you feel like you'll never be enough? What do you feel physically? Do you feel your hands fidget, your toes curl? Do you feel tightness in your knees, in your pelvis, the back, the bottom of your back, or the muscles in the back of your neck? Check in with your body and see what the inner critic makes you feel. Now let go of the inner critic. Let that energy leave the room. And check in with your pusher self. And the pusher is the energy pattern that turns off our emotional experience. It turns off our questioning, creative, and aware self and it turns off our vulnerability. It makes us productive. It makes us move forward. But when it's left unchecked, it can make us feel trapped and stuck, trying to relive the same patterns and relitigate the same fights that we had as a child, now with a supervisor, a boss, a spouse. We get that pusher self at the end of elementary school, the beginning of middle school, when our emotional experience becomes too much. We may have hormone trauma from the amount of feelings and emotional energy that puberty brings on. We're becoming a social being, a sexual being, an academic being, an adult being. And there's so much responsibility that is now our job that's being directed at us. And we cannot feel our emotional experience. It's simply too much during this point in life. And so we start to fixate on something, to obsess about something, to put blinders on. Because if we have blinders on, we're only looking at one thing and we're not looking at everything else that is too much. And so we get hobbies and we collect Pokemon cards and we go to the gym. We just start talking and entertaining people without really listening to what we're feeling or what we want to say. And we get this obsessive energy that doesn't care if what we're doing is healthy or unhealthy. It just wants us to keep moving so that we don't feel. And in adult life it says, one more Netflix episode, one more page in the book, one more hour up late because you deserve it, one more piece of popcorn, one more jelly bean, one more Tinder date, one more swipe on your phone, one more check this thing, make sure that you just keep moving and moving and moving so that you never stop and sink down and feel. So check in with this energy pattern, this pusher self. Start to think about where it is in your life and why. What are you avoiding feeling? And how do you avoid feeling it? What are you not in touch with even when you're doing healthy things like going to the gym or knocking things out at work? What is the pusher stopping you from noticing that would bring you more into authenticity and into wholeness and into growth? Where is it a tool that is helping you? And where is it a crutch that is holding you back? When the pusher is activated, what changes in your body? Do you notice your heart rate increase? Do you notice parts of your physical experience go numb? Do you notice your skin get hot, cold? Do you notice your posture changing? Don't think about it, but experience the pusher directly for just a moment. Tell it thank you for where it helps you. And tell it that you appreciate what it's doing, but that sometimes you need it to take a step back so that you can pursue a different project that it can't help with. Now take a deep breath and let the pusher go. Start to find your people pleaser part. The people pleaser is the energy pattern that we discover very early in childhood, when we're realizing that we are a separate being from our parents, from our siblings, from everyone we meet. They can't read our minds and we can't read theirs. we have to try and get them to like who we are, to see who we are. And sometimes we turn parts of ourselves off and our authentic voice off in order to be able to make that connection. Just like all the other parts of our personality, the pleaser can be a very helpful and beneficial thing, helping us have intimacy and connection if it's conscious. When it's an unconscious force that we haven't dealt with, that we haven't brought into consciousness, then the pleaser, like every other part of our personality, just starts to run the show and drive the car when it isn't needed. We start trying to get people to like us who we don't even care about, and even people who we dislike. We start to entertain, we start to agree, we start to charm, and we start to listen to people who maybe we shouldn't even give the time of day to. We should have more of an emotional boundary against. The pleaser can be a very unconscious part in people who are deeply empathetic. When the pleaser is unconscious, we have a hard time telling the difference between what we think and what other people think, from what other people are feeling and from what we are feeling. When do you take on other people's burdens, other people's emotions, your children, your spouses, your co-workers? Maybe to avoid conflict, we start to overly empathize with people who a boundary would better serve us. We start to take on the way that they feel so that we don't have to stand up for something, so that we don't have to have an argument or a disagreement or an emotional boundary. It is unhealthy to want to be liked by everyone all of the time. But when the pleaser is unchecked, that is what it is trying to get us to do, because it can't stand for anyone to dislike us. But when we give up our right to judge others, to know the difference between right and wrong and good and evil, we give up our integrity. We have to be able to say, this is what I am, and this is what I am not. And when we're able to notice the people pleaser, and feel it as a tool, as a part of us that sometimes we need and sometimes we don't, we're able to use it to bring intimacy and connection and mediation when it is needed. And we are also able to turn it off and say, this is not who I am, this is not what I want, and I don't want to have you like me. I don't care if you judge me, because this is who I am. We're able to do that when we need to. So notice that pleaser part of you that just begs for connection, is afraid of being alone. You may have an immediate emotional reaction to the pleaser where you feel very young and it takes you over and you remember that longing. You may also have an emotional reaction where you hate it, you despise it, you're so angry that there's this part of you that could need other people or care what they think. All of these speak to time and development and space and development where you were not given to listen to your own emotional needs. So listen to them right now, and sit with them, and feel them, and notice where the pleaser has been active in your life where you didn't need it, and notice where the pleaser has been missing where you did, and feel where the urge for intimacy and connection with other people manifests physically in your body. Do you feel it in your heart? Do you feel it down your neck and across the top of your back? Do you feel it down your head and your spine? How does it move you? This knowledge that we are a piece of a bigger project, and then throughout our life we have to be putting humanity back together. How do you feel that? Now let the pleaser go. And turn your attention to the vulnerable child. And the vulnerable child self with no ego. That is a purely unconscious being, an intuitive and a feeling reaction to all of existence. It's the first part of the personality. It's the thing that we are born into and born with. It has no ego, but it is also incredibly vulnerable. It is creative and life-giving and healing, but it is also afraid. The vulnerable child is honest about how much it wants to be cared for. It wants to cry out and have its needs met. And when they aren't, it is angry and upset. We begin to turn it off at the beginning of our adolescence. And often in therapy, we have to learn to turn it back on if we ever want to grow or we ever want to change. But most importantly, our vulnerable child is the hardest to get in touch with because it is our authentic self, our full self, that knows exactly what it wants to be, what it wants us to be. It knows what the project of our life is meant to be, what we are supposed to bring into the world, what we are supposed to manifest. In what places, in what parts of your life do you feel safe enough to be in touch with asking others for help or admitting that you're not okay? Where do you wish that you were more creative, and where do you wish that you could change and grow? What within me needs to die so that the rest of me can live? What about myself am I viewing as the enemy that is really part of myself that I have not learned to love and I have not learned to understand? Would I rather be perfect, or would I rather be whole? What parts of myself have I not yet come to understand? What part of myself am I afraid of? Let yourself breathe and make contact with all of the unconscious parts of you, especially the parts that you have a strong emotional reaction against, or a severe over-identification with. Practice turning them on and turning them off. Feel them physically, and sit with them and feel how old they are. What age do you get when you notice each of these pieces? Are there ages where they were damaged? Are there ages where they were hurt? Practice deep breathing and noticing the whole history of your personality and psyche. Notice the emotional wiring and symbolic language that is beneath the psychological self. And beneath all of these pieces, notice the deep, timeless, authentic self.